Welcome to the Binge Eating to Food Freedom podcast for driven hearts and minds. If you pour your best self into everything you do, and yet food takes up so much energy that it pulls you away from what matters most, you're in the right place. I'm Katie Papo, and I'm here to help you create a healthy relationship with food that supports you to live your highest and best life. And for an extra edge, become a Food Freedom Insider. Each week, I'll give you free, practical wisdom you can actually use in your daily life and more. Just head to katiepapo.com/resources or check the show notes. Without further ado, let's dive into the episode.
Hello, everybody. I've got a really unique episode for you today. It's a little different this week. So, as you know, this podcast is all about healing your relationship with food. But today I wanted to zoom out to talk about the topic of success. What does it really take to create success on your terms in a way that feels aligned for you and fulfilling? And to explore that, I sat down with Russ Ruffino, who is the founder and CEO of Clients on Demand. And by the way, last I checked, his business was generating over $1 million per month. And I met him back in 2018, I brought my business online, this business, for the very first time. And I very quickly realized I had no clue what I was doing. So in early 2019, I hired Russ's team to help me learn how to do Facebook ads, which I'd never done before. And they delivered a great service. I ran ads for about 2 years. By the way, the person who you heard last week, Amy, who ended 43 years of binge eating, she actually found me through one of those ads, which is amazing because now 5 years later, we're still in touch and I love her. So it's amazing how all this stuff connects. But the thing is, even though I hired Russ's team to help me learn just Facebook ads, what really shifted something for me was just witnessing the way that Russ thinks about success and leadership and integrity. And so this episode isn't about chasing money or hustle culture, but it's really about growing into your fullest potential and defining success in a way that feels really good and positive for you. So whether you're on a healing journey here, or you're building something else meaningful, or you're figuring out what's next for you, this is a great conversation to listen to. So I'm grateful very much for Russ coming on, imparting his wisdom. So let's welcome Russ Ruffino.
I'm so grateful to have with me today Russ Ruffino, CEO and founder of Clients on Demand, which helps coaches and consultants build and grow their businesses to impact so many people around the world. And I think by now, Russ, you've helped, gosh, it's in the thousands. How many coaches?
Last time we counted, which was a while ago, it was over 6,000.
Oh my gosh. I just want to take a moment before we dive in to thank you because honestly, my time in Clients on Demand, even though it was a long time ago, there are so many women now who have ended their eating disorders for themselves, who have stopped that cycle for their children. And you are connected to all of that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's awesome. Yeah. We always say like we geek out on our clients' results, but we really geek out on our clients' results, you know?
Right.
So if you're there making this massive impact and we had like a tiny little bit to do with that, I think maybe just a little bit of that karma kind of trickles down to us. So that's good.
Yeah, and it was definitely more than tiny. So I thought today we are going to be talking about universal success principles. You didn't start out having this huge business affecting so many people. Your career actually began as a struggling actor and just kind of being like, everything's okay. And you described that the meh kind of attitude was actually more dangerous even than rock bottom. And I was wondering if you could share your story to illustrate that.
Yeah. So the idea is that when you're in a situation that's like absolute hell, it's so bad that it kind of forces you to do something about it, most of the time. And look, people can get habituated to anything, right? Like the worst possible situations. But most of the time, when you take like a normal person and you put them in a job where it's like there's abuse going on and it's terrible and they're not making any money and the customers are jerks and all this other stuff, like you'll decide to do something about it. It'll force you to do something about it. In my case, I was bartending, I was acting, trying to be an actor. and which means you're basically like a bartender or a personal trainer, or you're giving massages, or you're waiting tables or whatever, right? Um, and I was bartending and it was fun and we made good money and you met people and it was fascinating to see people, have these in-depth conversations, and it was a very small bar. So I got to kind of like stand there and just, like watch people interact. It was really interesting. But that's the kind of situation I'm talking about where it's not that bad. And when it's not that bad, you can stay in something that's not that bad for 10 years, which is what I did. And what really did it for me, Katie, was I turned 30 and I was like, okay, there's no way I'm going to be a 40-year-old bartender. Like, I have to do something about this. And so that was what kind of led me down the path of online entrepreneurship and learning about this whole world of online marketing and online businesses. And I just dove into it. And the crazy thing is I could just do it. Um, it would be like if you had a gift for like chess or something, that you really had, were like this chess genius, but nobody put a chessboard in your hand until you were 30. And all of a sudden you were like, oh, I know what I guess I get this, but you know what I mean? Where usually that happens when you're like 5, and then, so for me with marketing and starting an online business, I didn't even know those things existed until I was around 30. And then that's when I dove into it and I found out that I could just do it. So it was kind of crazy.
Did you find that at that time you were more focused on the strategy of it or more of your energetics or mindset around it?
So it was always both. I was doing a lot of the mindset work when I was bartending, and doing my affirmations and doing my visualization and doing my gratitude. And one of the things we teach you guys at Clients on Demand is that one of the strongest manifestation techniques out there is to be grateful in advance for the things that you want. And so I would sit there every day, and I do I did my affirmations in the shower back then. I still do them in the shower now because no one's going to bother me. And I would sit there and I would say, thank you, thank you, thank you for my million dollar business. Thank you, thank you, thank you for my amazing, business or my amazing company or whatever it was at the time. And one day I woke up and I realized, you know what? If I really meant what I was saying, what would I do? And for me, it was obvious. I'd quit my bartending job and I would dive into this with both feet and I would go for it. So that's exactly what I did. And, thank God it worked out. I could just as easily have ended up like homeless or something, but that's not, that's not what happened. Um, yeah. So the mindset stuff was important to me from the beginning. And then I think that's where it starts. You build these castles in the sky of what you want your life to look like. And then the strategy piece comes in where you put a foundation under them. And that's why in our programs, we really have to teach our clients to do both. This is how you manage your own mindset and your own psychology. And that can be the hardest thing to do sometimes. And then once you've got that, this is now how we actually step by step go about creating this kind of business and the outcomes that you want.
Yeah, I found that myself. I thought I came in for the strategy. I thought like, oh, Russ can help me create Facebook ads.
Right.
But the mindset was so much more challenging and new things kept coming up. And I wanted to ask you about that with the mindset, because especially in the very beginning, when the grand vision feels so far away and your current reality is just so wildly different. Like maybe you're imagining $1 million, but you look at your bank account and it's $32. Or for my clients, maybe it's they visualize this healthy body, but then they look in the mirror and they don't like what they see. How do you bridge the gap between what you're visualizing and then what you're seeing, which is so much more repetitive?
Right. So that is what this whole thing is about. And like literally every verse in the Bible, if you want to go that way, is about that. Like, walk by faith, not by sight. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lead not on your own understanding. Over and over and over and over again throughout the Bible. And what's funny is people think about the Bible as one book. It's not one book. I think it's 66 books, if I have that right, written over thousands of years. And this is something that pops up over and over and over and over again, that you have an ideal of what it is that you desire, what it is that you're trying to attain, the person that you're trying to be, the life that you're trying to experience. And that reality has to be more real to you than anything that you see in the outside world around you. And that's where faith comes in. is that you have to visualize this outcome that you want, whatever it might be. And then you have to completely disregard anything that contradicts or would seem to contradict that outcome coming to pass. That's the discipline. And that's, I think, where, it really gets difficult for a lot of people because let's be real, any idiot can make a vision board. You know what I mean? Like any idiot can write down, oh, these are my 10 goals. That's awesome. I'm in. But at the moment life begins to show you something that is the opposite of what it is that you visualize, you really have to disregard those things completely. Um, and continue to understand that the vision that is inside of you has to be more real to you than what you are seeing out there in the world. And I know that sounds crazy to normal people, but if you think about your major achievers throughout all of human history, they were all crazy in that way. Some of them were like totally emotionally unstable, and some of them were like very stable people. But the one thing that they had in common is that they believed that they could do things that other people had thought they had absolutely no chance of doing. Like I know like a guy like Elon Musk has become like a total political hot potato lately or whatever, but let's just go back like 10 years, um, if your best friend comes to you and says, hey, Katie, I'm going to take my last $30 million. I'm going to sink it into a rocket ship company. You're going to spend a long time trying to talk that person out of that terrible, terrible idea. Right. But he held fast to that vision and he made that happen. And that's just an incredible, amazing, insane thing. And if you look at the people that we truly admire throughout all of history, even the people that we don't admire, but the people that effected great change, it's because they had an ideal in their minds, for better or for worse, and they were faithful to it and lived it into reality.
Well, so what if someone has, maybe it's not necessarily a vision of where you could see it in the material world, but it's a way that they want to feel. Like, for example, with money, let's say I want to feel security, but is that really attached to a certain number? Yes, we might achieve whatever our income goal was, but we might not still feel the security. We might then say, well, I still don't feel secure, so I need more. How do we manage that?
So one of our clients who is actually getting very successful asked me a question one time. She said, hey, Russ, um, it's funny. I've been doing this gratitude and I've been doing this visualization for a long time. And every morning I'm getting in this feeling place of like having all this money. And the more I get into the feeling place of having all this money, the less I kind of want it. And I said, exactly. Because you've proven to yourself that the thing is totally irrelevant. Every morning, if you're visualizing yourself having, flying on a private jet or something, and you can feel the leather of those nice club seats, and you're sitting there and you're watching your kids and you're watching your wife or your husband, and you're really there on the jet and you're picking food off your little Mediterranean platter that you've ordered from the catering company or whatever, you're doing that visualization. All of those feelings that you're feeling, there is no jet, there is no Mediterranean platter. Your kids are not on the seat next to you, and yet you are feeling all of those things regardless. And so over time, you begin to realize that the source of happiness truly is within you because every morning you're doing a visualization and it is making you happy. And then you begin to realize that you have infinite amounts of access to gratitude, to joy, to abundance, to all of these different things that we all want to feel. And it is the feeling that creates the outside reality, is not the outside reality that creates the feeling. And once you truly understand that, then you have the key to create what you want in your life. It reminds me of that amazing scene in that movie, The Matrix, which everybody needs to see. I saw it once and I was like, oh, that was a cool action movie. But then I saw it the second and third time and I started to realize there's much deeper stuff going on there. There's this amazing scene where Keanu Reeves walks into this room and there's this little boy on the floor dressed like a swami and he's got a spoon in front of him and he's bending the spoon with his mind. And he looks at Keanu Reeves and he goes, do not try to bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth. And Keanu Reeves goes, what truth? And he goes, there is no spoon. Then you'll realize it's not the spoon that bends, but yourself. And when I saw that, I realized, holy God, that is the key to achieving anything that you want in life. You can't change the world, but you can change yourself. And when you change yourself and your own perception, the world changes right along with it.
That is so true. And especially when we have visualized it for so long, then when it actually does happen, it doesn't even feel like a big deal. I see it with my clients who they lose weight as a side effect of the work that they do. And they used to be so weight obsessed, couldn't lose weight, was always gaining it back. And then it just kind of like falls off as a side effect. And by that time, they don't even really care anymore, even though that was what they wanted so desperately from the beginning. It's
Exactly.
quite amazing how that happens.
Well, as long as you're in a state of wanting something, you are telling your subconscious that you don't have it. So that's why that exercise of visualizing what you want and being grateful for it in advance is so powerful, because you're not just saying, "Hey, someday I'm going to have that thing." You're allowing yourself to feel it in your imagination right now. I have this thing right now today. And that's the state of mind that you need to live in, because when you're there, you kind of stop giving a shit about it. And then that's when it comes into your life.
Yeah. I remember being in your program, one of the practices that you had us do, and I was very diligent with this every day. You had us write our wins every day. And while I was doing that, I became so hyper aware of the inner critic inside me where I would write a win and then my mind would go, yeah, but you have so far to go. Or, yeah, but it wasn't 30 people, it was 20 people, like there was always a jab somehow.
Right. Right.
And the practice then became doing the wins and letting them stay in their own right and being grateful for them without adding the yeah, but.
Yeah, it's so important to celebrate every win. I was just reading this book by a football coach named Bill Walsh. It was called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And he basically took, I think it was the San Francisco 49ers from like dead last in the NFL to winning like two back-to-back Super Bowls. And then they asked him, well, why didn't you get what happened that you guys didn't get the third Super Bowl? And what he said was really interesting. He said, after we had gotten two Super Bowls, nothing mattered except winning a Super Bowl. And they stopped celebrating every little win. They stopped celebrating, oh, that was a great play. Oh, that was a great catch. Oh, that was a great touchdown. Oh, that was a great win. Because none of that stuff counted. The only thing that counted was winning the Super Bowl. And, a big success is a product of a lot of little successes that came before it. And so you need to celebrate every single one of those successes. Because if you're telling yourself, oh, that doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Then I think you're communicating to your subconscious that those little wins aren't really anything, and you're basically setting yourself up to feel terrible.
So, what's your strategy when that inner critic comes up, or even an external critic comes up, like a hater or a troll who I see on your ads? I see these haters and I'm like, you don't even know him. But I know they don't bother you. So, has it always been that way?
No, in the beginning, everything affects you in the beginning. Like I want to say something, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it sure seems true. Getting rich is just about solving bigger and bigger and bigger problems. Like that's all it is. So if you think about like Jeff Bezos, right? I can go on Amazon at 8 o'clock in the morning and order something, and it is delivered to my house in my hot little hands by like 1 o'clock that afternoon. Think about how many problems they needed to solve in order to make that happen. It's almost inconceivable. They need to have exactly the right numbers of exactly the right products in exactly the right places. They need to have the ordering system dialed in, the logistics of how they're going to get it to my. I mean, it's insane to think about how complicated that problem is. But because they decided to tackle that problem like that, they're getting paid accordingly, right? And, hey, God bless them. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause I couldn't do that before. Before, when I wanted something, I used to have to go to the mall and then park the car and then find the thing. And then, oh, we don't have it. We have to order it. Okay, now I got to wait another 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So anyway, it's all about solving bigger and bigger and bigger problems. But in the beginning, the little things seem bigger than they really are. You get your first refund request. Oh God. You get your first complaint. Oh God. You get your first snarky person leaving a negative comment on your Facebook ads. It's like, oh God. And then over time, as you go further and further in your business, you begin to realize that everything that seems like a big deal really isn't. I mean, another thing I saw Elon Musk say is that failure is basically meaningless unless it's catastrophic. And he's right about that. So you have someone ask for a refund. Okay, is that the end of your company? No. You have somebody complain. Is that the end of your company? No. You know what I mean? And then you get into the bigger stuff. Maybe one day you get sued. Is that the end of your company? Well, no. You know what I mean? Like stuff just happens. And so As you get bigger and more powerful and more experienced, the challenges get bigger and bigger along with that. And so when it comes to dealing with trolls and haters and all this other stuff, I think you hit the nail right on the head. They don't know me. And you realize that most of the hate that you see online is about projection. There are people that are feeling emotions that they don't want to acknowledge, hate for themselves, self-loathing, guilt, all this stuff. And they can't process those emotions in a healthy way. So they project them onto someone else. So I'm in a bad mood. I'm hating myself. All of a sudden, oh, there's Katie Papo's ad. Blah, blah, I hate you. Da, 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 da. And it's like, whoa, where did this person even come from? Right? It's all just projection. But then when you realize it, you sort of feel bad for those people because you're like, oh man, this person's really struggling with something, right? So the only complaints that I really care about is if it's a paying client who did the work and they're not getting the outcome. And in those situations, yeah, man, we'll reach out, we'll deal with it, we'll talk to them, we'll see what we can do to turn it around. I'm not just going to blow that off. But if it's just some random person who's never heard of me, they don't know anything about me. So who cares?
So what's your strategy when that inner critic comes up, the self-critic that you've had to deal with in your own mind?
We all have that. We all have this voice in our head that tells us like, it's not going to be okay. You're not good enough. It's not going to work out. For me, that voice was basically dead until April 13th, 2021, which is the day that my dad got diagnosed with lung cancer. And I went to the people that were running my company, Jane, and I said, Jane, listen, I got to go take care of my dad. I don't know when I'm going to be back. You guys got to run the company, do your thing. And my father passed away May 5th. So it was literally like 3 weeks from getting diagnosed to cancer to like him dying. That really took the wind out of my sails, Katie, and it really just shattered my faith. And looking back, it's like, okay, this is real life. Your dad was 73. Parents die. This is the world we're living in. Birds fly, fish swim. Eventually, your parents are going to die. But it didn't feel that way when it happened. It felt like I was cursed. It felt like, God had like turned his back on me and, all of a sudden I thought I had this beautiful, blessed, amazing, wonderful life and it was just snatched away like that. And that's when all that like negativity just kind of came roaring back and I had to go out there and I had to sort of slay those dragons again. And it took a while, it took a couple of years for sure.
Yeah.
So all of us have these, negative voices inside of us, but we have to create that discipline of not allowing those to determine, who you are and how you're gonna think about your life. And like I said in the beginning, making your vision for your life more real to you than any outside circumstances that might seem to contradict it.
Hmm. I was so sorry to hear about your dad, and I was thinking about the perspective that you've had on emotions. I feel like a lot of times in hustle culture,
Yeah.
there's just not an acknowledgement of them, and it's like we have to be productive no matter what. And I was wondering, how do you process emotions?
Pretty good sometimes and then not so well other times. So one of the biggest lessons that I learned over the years is that, and this is especially true with people that are sort of in, positive thinking, productivity, self-help kind of circles, is that you can push down a lot of stuff. So many of the techniques that we learn are just about getting into state. This is how you pump yourself up, like Tony Robbins or whatever has, priming and different, gurus have different exercises that are supposed to like get you pumped up and get you into that like totally juiced state where you can go out there and do amazing things. What I realized is you can be doing all of that on top of a lot of pain. And unless you at some point deal with that pain and allow that pain to come to the forefront, it will eventually kick in the door of your life. So the way I look at this, Katie, is that your emotions are like messengers. They have a message that they want to deliver to you. So you think about it as if it was like a UPS guy or FedEx guy. He's coming to your house, he's knocking on the door, and you go, no, 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 not right now, not right now. I don't want to feel this right now. I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm going to do some affirmations. I'm going to push this away. I don't want to like deal with the fact that, I hate my mother, or I'm jealous of this person or that person, or I'm guilty about whatever, you just don't want to deal with it. You push it away. That emotion is going to knock louder and louder and louder and louder. And eventually it's going to kick in the door of your life, and it's going to engineer an experience that forces you to now express and deal with that emotion. This is why, you know, somebody can walk into a bar who has a lot of repressed anger, and out of nowhere, some guy they've never seen before walks right up to him and was like, hey man, were you looking at my girlfriend? And the guy didn't even see the guy's girlfriend. Nothing happened, blah, 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 blah. It's because this guy has repressed anger and this guy has repressed anger. And boom, they're an energetic match for each other. And then it kicks off because all of that suppressed anger needs an outlet. And so your subconscious goes to work finding it and engineering a situation in your life that's going to allow all that stuff to come out. So it's much easier to just allow yourself to experience your emotions in the moment, because you never have to solve the problem. You just have to experience your emotions around the problem. Like, for example, when my dad passed away, arranging the funeral, settling his estate, all that stuff, like none of that was especially difficult from a purely physical perspective, right? You're just making phone calls. But what made it difficult is all of this emotion that's just surging out. And so that's all that you have to deal with. So when you have emotions, what you do is you sit there and you just let it be there. Oh man, I'm so jealous of that guy. Okay. Okay. I'm experiencing some jealousy right now, and I'm just going to allow that to just be there. And you let it be there, and it will be there for a few minutes, and then it will go away. And that's the way that we're meant to deal with our emotions. We're not meant to like push them down and repress them for 40 years until we have a freaking heart attack. We're meant to allow them out in the moment. And I learned that, Katie, from watching my kids. I watched my 2-year-olds, my 3-year-old, they don't have an ego yet. And so they go from totally happy and having a wonderful time to like murderous rage. And then 30 seconds later, they're having a great time again. And then they're sad about something. And I'm like, they're just experiencing their emotions. They're not suppressing them. They're not repressing them. They're not projecting them onto someone else, just allowing them to be there. And this is the way that human beings are built. And as we get socialized, we start to repress our emotions because we think they're bad. And then that's how we create these complexes. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. So you're much better off allowing yourself to feel whatever it is you're feeling, even if that might be inconvenient for you in the moment.
Yeah, I think that is a challenge, is that it is usually inconvenient. Last year, I went through the process of getting divorced, and during that period, I did not feel I had the emotional capacity to take on clients during that time.
Right.
And so I chose not to, because I felt like it was the responsible thing. If someone's going to be investing with me, I need to show up as a better version of myself than this. But
Right.
what I really struggled with was the guilt of that. The guilt of, I knew that if I really pushed myself, I still could do it. And I had been, I guess, indoctrinated into this idea of like push through the pain or push it down. And that was actually a surprise challenge came up. Was it was harder to not work than to work, but I did it because I felt like it was the right thing to do, so to speak.
Yeah, I think if you don't create that space for yourself, you will be forced to create that space for yourself. So after my dad passed away, we were down in Orange County. I still wasn't going back to work. I was settling his estate. I was dealing with this stuff. We were setting up the funeral, blah, blah, blah. And then, we had the funeral a few weeks after he died. And then I came back up and, went to bed. And then the next morning I was going to start work. And Katie, this is crazy. I was walking into my office, and all of a sudden I felt just the most severe stabbing pain in my lower back like I've never felt in my life. It literally felt like someone stuck a knife in between like my lower vertebrae. And I was walking, and then I just crumbled to the ground, and I commando crawled into a chair in my office, and I couldn't move. And I sat there in that chair for 2 days. Like my wife like brought me food. I peed in a bottle, not to be gross, but I swear I couldn't move. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't do anything. And I never had like back problems before. This was not, this was like my subconscious going, yo, you are not going back to work today. You know what I mean? And so I feel like you did exactly the right thing by backing off and by having enough self awareness to know, like, hey, you know what? This isn't the day, you know? And I think that hustle culture is born of, you know, just a lot of people just not wanting to deal with their emotions. And if it's just laziness you're suppressing, okay, fine. Like, I don't feel like going to the gym today, so I'm not going to go. No, bro, you got to go to the gym. Okay, fine. Go to the gym, like, go work out, do what you got to do. But when you go through a divorce or when your parent dies or there's some horrible thing that you're dealing with, and, forcing yourself to rise and grind is not the way to deal with it. It's the way to not deal with it. But I swear to God, those emotions will be heard. They are not going to be ignored. And it will manifest as some sort of health issue. It will manifest as some situation in your life that you can't get out of. Your subconscious will engineer some way for those emotions to come out. So you're much better off just giving yourself the space to feel whatever it is that you need to feel instead of just jumping back into work.
It's a good distinction you just brought up. I feel like it falls into the category of wise discrimination. You mentioned if it's laziness, then, keep going. But if it's the stabbing pain is a good example, but there can be more subtle in between versions of that. So if you don't feel like doing something, do you try to force yourself to do it? If you know it's good for you, do you try to force it, or how do you navigate?
I'm not good at that, honestly. If I have to do something, I have to do it and I'll just do it. You know, Especially if it's like serving a client, like if you have to go, like, listen, we were at a event for Millionaire Alliance, which is our highest level mastermind. And Jane, Jane, she found out her brother died at the event and she had to do a whole talk on something. So in that moment, she just pulled it together and was like, let me do what I have to do, and then I'll deal with this later, right? So sometimes you have to do what you have to do. You know what I mean? You're supposed to go on stage in 5 minutes and you get some terrible news. You go on stage, you do what you got to do. But there's far, far, far too much of that in the sort of hustle culture. And so you have to just differentiate between like, hey man, I'm kind of feeling lazy today. I'm gonna like smoke some weed and play some video games and hang out or whatever. Um, that's not what I'm talking about. And when you're in real, actual emotional pain that needs attention, you know what I mean? In those situations, you just have to be honest with yourself when you just don't have anything to give. I have days where I wake up sometimes, doesn't happen very often, especially after my dad passed away. I was like, I can't do this right now. And any decisions you make in that state are going to be bad decisions anyway. So just give yourself a minute to pull yourself back together. I think it's important. And I think that far too many business owners and just like high achiever types in general are completely out of touch with their emotions. And I think it causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, every time. I always get sick if I suppress emotions. I get physically sick eventually. Some, like you said, if you
Yeah.
don't choose it, it will just happen to you. You will be forced to deal with it at some point.
So I'd like rather do it on my terms. Do you know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm gonna take a day today. I'm gonna go for a walk in the forest. I'm gonna just, let some of this stuff out and just let it be there. And then when I'm ready, I'll go back to work. I think that's much better than just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until you get sick or until something happens.
Yeah. I think part of what my brain needed to adapt to, having grown up quite anxious, was to understand that not everything is an emergency and that I am not an emergency room surgeon where I need to be there right now. That most things, if you take some time to walk in the forest, the world's not going to fall apart. Nothing really bad is going to happen, and you're going to be showing up as a better version of yourself. Are there any practices that you would swear by? Like if somebody really wanted to develop, I don't even want to just say success in a materialistic sense, but success in the sense of having a really strong internal world.
Yeah. So the most important practice is that practice of daily gratitude. That's number one, is taking time every morning to visualize the life that you want as if it's already done and being grateful for it in advance. All the awesome stuff I have in my life came from that process. And I have some really awesome stuff in my life. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be the other thing we just talked about, which is to make it a practice that when you are feeling something you do not want to feel, that you take a moment and you just sit with it and allow it to be there. The question that I ask myself is, where am I feeling this in my body? Right. So let's say like one of your clients, like you said, looks in the mirror and is like, oh, or steps on the scale or whatever it is, and they just feel lousy. Right. I take a second. I go, okay. I'm now experiencing something. Where am I experiencing this in my body? Where am I feeling this like physical sensation of this emotion? And then I just sit there with it for a minute. And what you'll find is that's like letting the door open and letting the messenger in and letting the messenger drop off his package. And he doesn't hang out at your house. He goes away. So that's exactly what it is. Like by allowing that emotion that you don't want to feel in and allowing yourself to feel that physical, because that's all an emotion is, right? You feel anger maybe here, you feel something here, you feel something, fear manifests as like a lump in your throat. So it's usually a physical sensation that goes with these emotions, right? So and it's different for everybody, but you allow yourself to experience that physical sensation fully. And I will be damned if it doesn't go away in about like 2 minutes. You know what I mean? Maybe if it's something really, really, really serious, it might be there for like 20 minutes or an hour. You know, if you think about like what's the longest you've ever cried in one stretch? Maybe 20 minutes, right? Maybe a half an hour. Maybe if it was really bad, you were crying for like an hour, but no longer than that. We just can't feel one emotion like for that long if we're not repressing it, right? So that's the second practice, is to just allow yourself to feel what it is that you want to feel. And I would say those are the two most important bedrock practices. The other thing I do all the time is I read Joseph Murphy all the time. He's written a bajillion books. This book is like a giant anthology of a lot of his work. So you want to just be filling your mind with positive, powerful truths, timeless truths. Um, but yeah, those are the big three. Those are the things I do all the time. I'm constantly reading stuff that I would think is empowering. I do my gratitude every day. And when I'm feeling something negative, I allow myself to feel it instead of pushing it down.
And they're also satisfying. I feel like I used to fear my emotions so much. That if I felt an emotion, I would be consumed by that emotion. But it was exactly what you just said. I would have, last year in my divorce, yeah, I would have some longer stretch cries, but a lot of them, it would just come up and I'd cry for maybe 10 seconds in the car really hard, and then it's over, just like a Florida storm. Like it just comes and then it's over.
And that's how it is, because these big emotions, even with really traumatic stuff, it comes in waves. And so when those waves come, you allow it to be there. You allow yourself to feel it. You'll understand you're not going to be feeling that forever. You probably won't even be feeling it 10 minutes from now, but you allow it to pass through you, and then you move on with your life. And when the next wave comes, the next wave comes. And that's the way, again, that we're supposed to deal with our emotions. We're not supposed to let our minds get in the way and repress them and suppress them and all this other stuff. That's just not the way that we're supposed to handle it.
I wanted to ask you, you already brought it up just now when you held up the book. I wanted to ask you, I know you're a huge avid reader and you're always filling your mind very intentionally. What principle, success or otherwise, that you've taken from a book do you feel like you carry around with you the most?
Just this idea of having like a real active faith, this idea that the vision that you are creating in your own mind is more real and more powerful than what is in the world. That's the most powerful concept. That's the most powerful revelation that a human can have, is that what you are experiencing as your life is just the outpicturing of what's going on between your ears. That's it. It's what you are thinking and feeling and believing that is just reflected back to you as your life. It's as if like, you know, You were plugged into some kind of matrix or some kind of simulation, and the only instruction that the simulation had is, hey, you know what, constantly be monitoring Katie for whatever Katie's deepest beliefs are, and just reflect them right back to her, and create experiences that just reflect those beliefs back. That's it. That's how the world works. And so what that means is that, again, if we're trying to change the world, that's like if you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see, and so you start drawing on the mirror, right? The way to change the reflection in the mirror is to change yourself. So once you realize that, then you become responsible for everything in your life. And then when you become powerful, because you are either at the mercy of outside circumstances, or outside circumstances are at the mercy of you. And one of those attitudes is going to produce success, and one of them is not.
What would you say to someone who really is mentally on board with that, but has a strong fear of failure because maybe they've tried to fix this problem so many times and each time they really got their hopes up but then ended up disappointed? How to maintain the faith and adjust the relationship with failure?
So this is another great thing I'm really glad you brought up. The way to deal with fear is to define it. So most of the time when we are afraid, we don't really know what we're afraid of. It's just like, oh God, what if my business fails? Or like, oh God, what if I, gain all the weight back? Or, oh God, what if this? Oh God, what if that? And the way to deal with that fear is to answer that question. Okay, what if my business fails? What if I start this new business? And what if it just freaking tanks? What would that look like? And you really define the worst case scenario. So this is what I did when I was thinking about quitting my bartending job, because I was really scared to do that. I wasn't making enough money online to like supply, my life. Like I was making maybe $500 a month online. I think my rent at the time was $2,400 a month because I was in LA, and this was like 20 years ago or whatever, um, 15 years ago. So I sat down though and I did the math. I said, you know what, man, I'm terrified. Okay, but what am I afraid of? What would be the worst case scenario? I go out there and I start this business and it's a total disaster. Then what? What would I do? What would I do to get things back on track? And I thought to myself, well, okay, I'd be out of money, but my credit's pretty good. So I could probably take out some credit cards and live off credit cards for a minute. I could probably borrow some money from some relatives. And honestly, I would just go out and get another bartending job. And I was like, oh my God, like that's not that bad. That's pretty much where I am right now. I'm a broke bartender. I would be a broke bartender only 6 months from now. Okay, well, that's not that bad. But the best case scenario is it changes the rest of my life. So if you look at it like that and you say, okay, best case scenario changes the rest of my life. Worst case scenario, this is pretty much the same as where I'm at right now. You got to take that bet. It's like if I said, hey, Katie, we're gonna flip a coin, and if you lose, you're gonna give me $1. But if you win, I'm gonna give you $1,000,000. You would want to play that game all day. Like, great, let's flip that coin as many times as we can. You know what I'm saying? So the key to dealing with fear is to define it, to really define it in detail. What is this thing that you are afraid of? If you did this thing you're thinking about doing, what is the worst case scenario? And if the worst case scenario happened, how would you deal with it? And then you can ask yourself, well, how likely is the worst case scenario? In my case, I gave myself about 50-50. So, it worked out. But even if it hadn't worked out, I would just be bartending again. And that's right where I was before. So how could I not take that shot?
I like that you brought up what is the best case scenario also. And I think that that is, especially when I was first starting this journey with you, I think the reason why I felt so pulled to invest with you, even though it was a lot of money for me, it was very scary for me to do. But I kept thinking, well, what's the best case scenario? The worst case scenario is I lose money and I'll be really annoyed about that. But the best case scenario, like this could be life changing for me and for so many other people. And the likelihood of that happening is probably higher than it just burning and crashing to the ground.
Exactly. So you say, what's the worst case scenario? How likely is it? And what would I do to get things back on track if that happened? And then you flip the script and you say, okay, what's the best case scenario? How likely is that? And then is that, way better than the worst case? And that's how you can make decisions. You can make decisions in your business like that. It's called an expected value calculation. You can do that in your business. You can do that in your life. You just look at it and you say, okay, if the worst case scenario is this, and then how bad is that? It's usually not that bad. How likely is it that it's going to happen? And the best case scenario is awesome, and it's pretty likely that's going to happen. Then you go for it. You know?
One of my clients recently, she just joined my program just over a week ago. And she said, I was debating because of the money, but then she said, but I have like 30 years of life left, probably. So if you divide that over 30 years, if this works, then that would be very little for the piece that I would have for the next 30 years. And that was how she made the decision for herself, even though, yes, of course, there's the inherent risk of trying something you've never tried. But I think it's good to not only look at the worst case scenario, but to visualize the best.
Yeah, and then you also have to consider the horrendous cost of inaction. So I like with that bartending situation, there were really three options here. You know what I mean? Like I could try it and fail, in which case I would just get another bartending job. I could try it and succeed, which would be awesome, or I could stay right where I was. And that was the worst of all, because the cost of inaction is horrible. You know what I mean? So you've got to do that calculation. And if in your mind that calculation is like, hey, you better go for it, then you better go for it.
The cost of staying stuck is usually a much higher cost than the potential risk of not even trying.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've found that I've really appreciated the wisdom that I've heard from you that you feel is very valuable for your children. I was wondering if you could just share any wisdom.
Well, it's definitely the stuff that we just talked about, right? So the gratitude and the how to deal with your emotions and how to make those decisions. I just think those are the bedrock of having a successful life. I mean, I think like until you take responsibility for your own life, you're basically useless. As long as you're blaming your parents or the government or whoever, you're basically stuck. So what I teach my children is the same thing that my dad taught me. He said, Russ, there's two keys to life. Always do the right thing and always have God in your life. And I think that is what it really comes down to. In every situation in your life, you know what the right thing is to do. It's just a question of like, are you going to do it or not? And, the gratitude and the dealing with your emotions and the other pieces that we spoke about, that's just the system that's worked for me to create the life that I want. But at the end of the day, we are all capable of far more, I think, than we realize. Somebody told me one time, God's will for your life is just beyond your wildest imagination. And I have experienced that directly to be true. Because speaking of the gratitude, Katie, most of the time what happens is I will have something in mind that I'm visualizing. And when that thing shows up, it'll be far better than whatever it was that I was talking about. Take this house, for example. All I knew is that I wanted a house up in the mountains. That's all I knew. And so I was visualizing every day and I didn't know what I wanted to look like or anything. I'm not a good visualizer, right? Like if you're like, Russ, picture an apple, I'm like, it's kind of fuzzy. Like I'm not really good at that. But I knew I wanted this house or a house. And I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you for my amazing house in the mountains. And we went to go look at a house. It was like 4,300 square feet. It was a good house. Um, it was on this little lake and I was like, oh, this is cool. There's enough space for me and Sarah and the four kids. And then like for one of our relatives to come and visit. And, that's nice. And I was like, all right, this looks good. It's in our budget, and I was kind of just like, yeah, this might be it. And just on a spur of the moment, my realtor goes, hey, let me show you guys this other house real quick. And she takes us to this 20,000 square foot, 9 bedroom, 9 bathroom monstrosity. And I walk into this house and I just get that feeling like this is the house. This is it. And it was out of our budget. It was more than I wanted to spend, but I got that feeling. This is it. This is the fulfillment. You've been asking for this thing. Guess what? Here it is. And so we ended up getting a ridiculous deal on it because there was a couple here that had gotten like divorced or something. And I think like it was like the husband was living in one part of the house with his new wife and then his ex-wife was living in it was a whole messed up situation. Anyway, we got a really good deal on the house that we should not have gotten. And it just showed up right when we needed it, right at the right time, right in the right way. And it's a house that I never even would have looked at, never would have looked at. So, God's will for your life is just beyond your wildest imagination if you can visualize what you want and hold fast to that vision and act as if that vision is real. When it comes to fruition, 9 times out of 10, it'll be far better than whatever it was you were thinking.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think especially when someone's in a lot of pain, like I know for my clientele, they've tried everything and it's like, I just want to be normal. I just want food to not be a constant stream in my thoughts all the time. And when they first start the work, part of what we do is we think bigger than that. We think bigger than just normal or just not obsession. Like, what would it actually look like if you had a truly peaceful, healthy relationship with food? Not just that you weren't completely obsessed. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on today. I so appreciate your time. I know everyone listening is going to be so appreciative.
I hope so. I hope they got you. I know this, we're not talking about what you usually talk about, but hopefully people got value.
It's universal, I think. I think in solving any problem, all these things will be a factor. And I'm just so grateful. And the whole reason I've been able to reach so many of my clients has been because of you. And I just can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, if you'd like to learn more about Russ, actually, would you like to share where people can find you if they want to learn more?
Oh yeah, just go to our website. It's clientsondemand.com. You can find me on Instagram at Russ Ruffino. I'm on Facebook, Russ Ruffino. So yeah, if you just look up Russ Ruffino, you'll find me, or you can go to our website, clientsondemand.com.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show notes for you guys. So thank you so much, Russ, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you for spending time with me today. If you're ready to take the next step in your journey, become a food freedom insider at katiepapo.com/resources. You'll get free practical guidance and instant access to my foundations class. That's katiepapo.com/resources. New podcast episodes come out every week, so subscribe to the podcast now. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to leave a kind review. It's very meaningful to me, and it helps other people find freedom too. I appreciate you so much, and I hope to help you further on your journey. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and others. See you next week.